when I was in school. That was my whole mentality. That was where I loved to be. I loved to play. I loved to be in the gym. I loved to shoot. I loved to dribble. I was fully invested in the game of basketball. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the OT and OT podcast, the show where we go overtime on all things sports and off topic on everything else. Let's get into it. Today's episode is going to be full of the difference between motivation and the discipline in the off season, and why the off season is typically harder than the season itself. And I'm going to be coming at this from a former athlete in high school and junior high, and now as a coach, and the way that I see athletes perform in season compared to what I know they do in the off season. The very first place I want to start, and I may jump back and forth between a lot of different things, but I'm going to try to stay consistent and stay on one straight path from here on. The very first place I wanted to start was in my personal experience. I started sports as a young kid, and the very first thing that I noticed about myself was how competitive I was. I loved to compete in every single thing that I did, whether that was sports or whether it was playing games or, anything that you can compete against somebody else with, or even competing against myself in certain things. Like, I would do that. And, everybody makes that joke of, you have that internal monologue of, oh, there's 5 seconds left on the clock. If he makes his shot, they'll win the state championship or the national championship. Oh, he missed, but somehow 3 seconds got, that's what I would do. And I'm sure everybody does that. There's a reason that's a joke that people make, but I did it because I competed and I was very discouraged if I missed ever. And I know it's such not a niche thing, but it is kind of niche because anybody that didn't really play sports, I don't think would do anything like that. So where I'm going with this is competition and your competitiveness, I think, drives kind of the motive behind your discipline and your motivation. Because I don't think if you're not, I think if you're not competitive, I wouldn't assume that your drive for doing well or competing and having that motivation would be the same as somebody that is very competitive and wants to win all the time. You may be disciplined, and that's fine, but I just don't feel like your motivation is the same, or it may not even exist in the same realm. And going off of that, I grew up, I had 2 main sports that I played from 4th and 6th grade, clear until I graduated, and then I added in track along. I did that for less years than the other 2. But I started competing, playing football, as a 4th grader, and then I played basketball 6th grade, and then I did track 7th, 8th, and then my sophomore through senior year in high school. So I was always doing things. I was always competing against other people, and a lot of that started mostly because of family members. For football, my drive for competition started with my uncle. He is a couple years older than me, and we would hang out with each other quite often. I would go to my grandparents' house, and he was still living there at the time when he was in school. So every time, he had football practice or whatever, and I was too young for my own, he would bring his pads home, and then he would joke with me and say, hey, throw my pads on, let's go outside and play football or whatever. So I competed with him. I obviously wasn't going to win at any point during this time. And I was just young enough that we never really could actually compete. He had to give more effort to try to win. He's about 7 years older than me, so the ages just didn't really line up that great for him to have to actually try to beat me. But yeah, that was where it first stemmed. And after that, I was so adamant in competing, especially in football, and that then led into basketball and track. But kind of where I want to go with this is just kind of speak on how I felt about each of those seasons individually, and kind of explain how I managed, still being able to do all those things at a high level, um, at least what I thought was a high level, and maintain the consistency through the off season as well. So to start off, I'm going to go with football first, and then we'll go to basketball and then track. Football, like I said, I started in fourth grade, played through in junior high into high school, and really like the true competitiveness. Like I always loved to win, and I always competed, but like there was a different meaning behind it. The start of my sophomore year, my freshman year of high school, and that's where I'll start in high school. I bounced around different positions through junior high, fifth, sixth grade. And then in high school, I kind of found where I was going to be through high school. I transitioned into running back, and then I played defensive back on defense. So my freshman year, I played JV the majority of the year. I dressed down for every varsity game, but it wasn't a guarantee that I would get in. But then towards the third or fourth game of the year, my coach pulled me up, put me on kick return for varsity, and then I would get a couple offensive snaps here and there if the team was doing well, and then towards the end of the season, I started to get a couple more reps defensively, offensively, but I never really played that many minutes each game. And then the thing that really pushed me to do better, especially with football, was at the end of the season, our school had gone, I believe it was 4 seasons without winning a single game. So it had been, 30 plus games since our team had won a football game. And this season I think we went 5-4 before losing our final game. And it was a huge turnaround. Like we had a lot of seniors that were, very hopeful. We had a new coach that year. And one thing that happened, so at the end of our game, we lost to the eventual state champions that year. We lost. We go to the locker room. The coach stands up and says, I need all the seniors to stand up. They all stand up. And he looks at the underclassmen and he says, these men right here are the baseline for where we want to build to and where we want to get. They've paved the way from this point on. They've bought in. They've really took a hold of what they could have done this season, and they put everything on the line. And they did a fantastic job this year. And that's what I'm expecting from all you underclassmen. And then, he said, underclassmen, you need to walk through and shake every single one of these seniors' hands and tell them thank you for the season. So we did. We got up. I wasn't really too close with any of them. Like I said, I played minimal snaps on offense or defense. I played kick return, for the majority of the season up to that point. And I had actually gotten hurt during this game that we lost. I rolled my ankle pretty bad, and I could walk, but I was just like limping around. And anyways, at this point, when we're shaking the seniors' hands, I go up to all of them. I shake their hands, say thank you, I appreciate the time, whatever. And then a senior holds me there for a second, and he says to me, after what I wouldn't have believed any of the seniors to be really looking at me as any significant person on the team, he holds me and he says, I think you can be a leader on this team one day. I think that you could be a great player, but you need to get into the weight room and you need to push yourself to do better than what you already have done this season. You've come a long way, and I think you have the potential to lead this team. And when he said that, I really took that to heart. I literally thought about it for weeks after that, and I was like, dang, this is an intense moment. Like this is awesome. And I was so amazed that somebody believed in me that I never would have thought that was looking at me at any point in the season. And he said, you're doing a great job. These are the things that you can do to get better. And I went with that. I totally dove in. I took lifting a lot more seriously, and I probably weighed no more than 130 pounds with my pads on at this time. And by the next football season, I weighed close to 160. mostly because I got into the weight room and I gained a lot of weight and muscle um, during the off season of football and then into the next season. And it wasn't like I lived in the gym. I played basketball and I didn't do track that year. So I was busy trying to build myself up, be bigger, be stronger, get faster, and I really did. And it only took this one thing that this person said to me to say, "Hey, you can do this," and I believe that you can. So I took that to heart and I got to work after that. And the off season in high school for sports is different because yes, you're not doing that sport, so it technically is the off season. But for a high school athlete that does multiple sports, as long as you're doing something, another sport, you can consider that not necessarily the off season, but you're like off season training. So I was still active playing basketball and doing, a bunch of physical activity, weights, PE classes. But the next year, I mean, it really pays off when you get to work and you do what you need to do to get better. Because my sophomore year, I was starting safety on the defensive end, and I got more offensive reps. And I obviously played kick return still. We had some really, really good athletes my sophomore year, and I was fortunate enough to be able to be a starter for a part of the season. And I hate talking about like things that I accomplished because it kind of like makes me but anyways, I felt like I had worked really hard that year, and like I didn't really understand awards or things that you did at that point. Like given like all state teams or whatever, first team all state, whatever. But at the end of the season, I get a newsletter or something sent to me from our head coach, and it says the all Idaho team or something like that. And I open it and I read through the names. I'm like, why did coach send me this? And I'm looking through it and I see my name, and it said first team all state defense. And I was like, what the heck? So I look at it, I read it, and I was like, the sophomore from, I'm not going to say my school, but Braxton Ramirez, 6 foot, blah. Ended with six interceptions this season and was a key element to the Panther defense playing well or whatever. So I read that and I was like, holy crap, like I never expected my name to be mentioned, especially as a sophomore with all of these other kids that are very good athletes from across the state, like not just 2A, like it was all of high school varsity football players. So I was like blown away by the fact that I was noticed by the whole state association of sports. And that also really hit me like deep. Like I took that and I ran with that basically. I continued to push, I continued to work hard, and that also translated like my freshman year of basketball, I played C team, I played the freshman team, and then the next year, like I said, there was never really an off season. I was always playing basketball. I was always lifting. I was always doing PE, whatever it was. Like I was always being active, and I think that translated to why, these next couple things happened to me in my life. In high school, I was pulled up to varsity as a sophomore, and basketball was really the bigger sport than football at the time. Like there was more kids that tried out for basketball than played football. So to make the team in general was a great thing, but then as a sophomore to be pulled up to varsity in a class that had 14 seniors try out was a great honor. I genuinely, like, I remember the day of tryouts when I got called into the locker room and they said, we want you to play varsity this season. I didn't even know like what to, like I had a couple of kids, seniors that I was super close with, that I was friends with because of football. They're like, yeah, you're definitely getting pulled up to varsity this year. Like there's no question. I was like, nah, you guys are just like pulling my leg. Like it's fine if I don't, like that's totally cool. Like I'm not expecting to play varsity at all. And then when I got called in, they're like, yeah, we want you to play varsity this year. They think or we think you're going to be a great piece to this team, and I think we can do really well this year. And I just feel like I sat back and I was like, what? I was so blown away by the fact that as a sophomore, I was going to get to play varsity. And I remember my coach, he said, yeah, we want to play with the varsity, but as of right now, we're looking like you may be able to start a couple games by Christmas as long as you work hard and you're doing everything that we're asking you to. And I was like, oh, great. High school basketball starts mid-November, mid to late November around here. So I was like, cool. That gives me, a month. I got, time to work, and that was great. But then, come our first basketball game, coach comes up to me. This was before the game even started. This was the day of the game. So not even the day before when we had practice, pregame practice. The day of the game, coach comes up to me and he says, hey, you're going to be starting tonight. The very first game of the season. I had no idea, didn't know what to do. And I was like, wait. Anyways, like I was saying, my coach came up to me and he said, you're starting tonight. And I don't know why he waited until like that day, like right before the game started, to say, hey, you're going to start. But I was like, coach, what do you like? I'm starting tonight. I was blown away. And really, this was, let's see, probably 2 weeks before Christmas break. So I was like, we have 5 games before Christmas break, and you're saying, at the beginning of the season, you're like, you can start after Christmas. But now you're saying I'm starting the first game of the season as a sophomore. We have 8 seniors on the team. Whoa, like I'm starting over them? And I was like, this just doesn't make any sense. But then, I kind of got validated through my denial a little bit. And, the nerves are real. Like if you're not like ready, the nerves that you get are absolutely crazy. Like I maybe had 6 points that game. Like I was a decent scorer, but I was so nervous, like because I had just started, that I missed layups. I was missing easy jumpers. I don't even remember if we won the game. I just know that I was so extremely nervous that I did not play well. But by the end of the season, there was only one game that I didn't start, and that game was senior night. And I was very fortunate, to be given that opportunity as well. So, like I said, I was so motivated to perform well that I was so disciplined. I tried to do everything I could exactly like I was asked. Every play, every possession, every down, every time I got the ball, like I did everything I could in my power to do exactly what I was supposed to do. And that was my motivation, and that was my discipline. So I was very disciplined, I think, in this during season, but then in the off season as well. I definitely played more basketball in the off season than I did football. Basketball was the one sport that I truly liked more at the time, and I spent so much time. I think if you counted the amount of hours that I spent playing basketball from my freshman year to the time I graduated high school, it would probably be close to, I don't even know, like 10,000 hours, like legit. I mean, you add in 2 hours a day for practice for 4 months, 5 days a week, minus 2 games, but you have to add the game. So really, if you're taking 2 hours a day every day for 5 days, sometimes 6. I mean, you're 10 hours a week for 4 months. I mean, you're 160 hours just in season for 1 year. So you take in 160. I bet, maybe not 10,000. I bet like 6,000, because you take 140 times that by 4. What is that? That's 560. So we'll just round up to 600. 600 hours of in-season time. I bet that I played up close to 6,000 hours of basketball in the time that I was in high school, including summer. But anyways, that was a little tangent. Like basketball was where I resided when I was in school. That was my whole mentality. That was where I loved to be. I loved to play. I loved to be in the gym. I loved to shoot. I loved to dribble. Like I was fully invested in the game of basketball in high school. And I think that translated to me playing well throughout the season. I was a 3-year starter. I was usually the leading scorer on the team, usually the leading assists. And like I said, I don't really like to talk about myself like that, but I'm just trying to share like my work ethic and my motivation and discipline in high school for sports was, I think, like at such a high level. Like I was so adamant about doing well that I was so serious about sports. And that may not be the best thing, especially because I wasn't planning on trying to play in college or professionally, but I was just like, my mindset was, why am I doing this if I'm not doing it to do the best that I can every time? And it bothers me when I see athletes like that. And I know that that translates to athletes doing more so of things in the off season. And that's what this whole conversation is about. Just like when are you working hardest to be the best you can at what you do? And that's one of the points that I have written down right here is like structure disappears. When your structure disappears, that's when you start to make excuses of why things aren't going your way. You know, if you don't have a consistent schedule of practice, like if you miss practice 2 or 3 days a week, like then you start to make more excuses, reasons to miss practice, reasons why you missed practice. That's not okay as an athlete, especially if you're dedicated to your sport. Like you shouldn't be making excuses. You have to create your own structure. Even during season, like there should be times where you're working on your own things on your own time. That's where the great athletes come in. That's when those athletes set themselves apart from the rest of the group. Now, I'm not saying I did that. I definitely spent time practicing on my own things outside of team time or practice time, but I'm not saying like I split myself away from everybody else. Like every time my group of friends wanted to play basketball, we would all go play basketball. We would all do those things. Like we had a very tight-knit group in terms of what we did as a team and when we practiced and when we got better. It's definitely a person-by-person basis. Like my discipline and my motivation may have been very different than somebody else's, but that doesn't mean that the means behind those things were different. Like I know that I had teammates that I played more basketball than, but that doesn't mean that they weren't disciplined in what they were doing. Maybe they were disciplined with working at the time. Maybe they were still using that to get a little bit stronger in the off season. Maybe they weren't in the weight room, but they had to move pipe during the summer. Like those are all motivations for doing things. Maybe they willingly took on doing those things so they could get better for a specific sport or event or whatever it is that they were doing. So that's a short way of me saying if you have high motivation and high discipline, it can lead to great results. Like I said, I played very hard in season, but I also did everything I could off season when I wasn't busy. Like I lived a very busy lifestyle as a teenager. I worked during the summer, all summer on a farm. I went to basketball camps. I went to basketball tournaments during the summer. I would do 7-on-7 football when we could during the summer. I would lift weights in the summer. Like I was doing constant things. Like I was never sitting still. And I could tell like the kids that didn't do those things, they had a harder time when it came to getting back into season. It took them longer to get going. I was able to get going day one. Like I was back to where I was the previous season and then getting better throughout the season. So it's all like I'm saying, the basis of my point is if you're motivated and you have high discipline, you can get to the point where you are the top of your game. You can be the best athlete on the floor, on the court, on the field, on the track, whatever it is that you're doing on the diamond, wherever you are, if you have high discipline and high motivation, you can be the best person on your team. You can be the best person at your school. You can be the best person in the state. You can be the best person in the country. I've seen a lot of high-profile athletes. I have seen, probably, in my opinion, some future Olympians. I have played against a professional athlete at this time right now in high school. And I know he got there because he worked hard. He was motivated. He was disciplined. He was very naturally gifted. Great football player. But he worked hard to get there. You can't just get there by chance. You have to work at it. And we did kind of just hit on this, but I wanted to bring it up again of like athletes, especially in high school, typically will regress in the off season. And not even just high school athletes, but college and professional athletes as well. I think, professionally, they obviously don't have as much time off as a high school athlete. Like that is their job. They are required to be at a certain amount of practices, a certain amount of camps, a certain amount of, team meetings. Like those are all things that they have to do. It's in their contract. So they only get a limited time away from the game. So they can't regress as much, but they still do. Like that's just part of human nature. They're going to regress a little bit because that's just what happens in humans. But you get into high school athletes, those kids that you can look at and say, this is the best kid in my high school in any sport that he does. And then you have to look at what that kid is doing when he's not competing at that event. He's probably lifting, he or she. This is all boy, girl, not subjective, but these athletes are probably lifting weights, probably doing some sort of speed training. They are going to camps. They are practicing. They're doing their own drills. They're doing probably everything that everybody else isn't doing. And that's why they're the best athletes at your school or in the country or in the nation, whatever. Because they're doing the things that nobody else does. They're doing all the dirty work behind the curtain. They're the ones that are the producers of the show and the star of the show all at once. They're doing everything that nobody's watching, so everybody can watch them later. That was kind of a bar, honestly. I like that. And I wonder if that's where the term, like dance like nobody's watching you. Like, I wonder if that's where that came from, because the saying is like, do what you want to do, even though there may not be anybody there. And for those people that want to be professional athletes or high elite athletes, like they're doing the things that nobody else, they're doing everything they can while nobody's watching. Like I said, they're doing all the dirty work behind the curtain, the stuff that nobody sees, the immense blood, the immense sweat, the immense tears. Like there's a reason that's a phrase, blood, sweat, and tears. Because you're going to push yourself so much to the point of bleeding. Your hands are going to bleed. Your feet are going to bleed. You're pushing yourself to cry, to be so overwhelmed with either joy or anger or whatever it is, like, because you're pushing yourself to do so well at this thing. Like I can tell you, I've done that. Like I pushed myself to the point where I cried because I felt so accomplished, but also so drained. And obviously, if you're pushing yourself really hard, you're gonna sweat a lot. You got some swass for real. Just kidding. I mean, actually, yes, but that's not the phrase. That's not the term. At least that's not what it means. Anyways, you have to do the things that are hard when nobody's watching, because if you don't, you're not going to progress, and you're not going to be seen as somebody that looks like they're working hard. I think that people saw me as an athlete that worked hard and did everything he could to perform at best. And sorry, my eye is itching so bad right now. Um, I think a great guest on this show would be my mom. To get my mom on here and just talk to her about like her experience as a parent, watching me, develop and grow. Because I've never actually had that conversation with her. We're doing that. Stay tuned. We're gonna bring my mom on the show. Let's do it. I'm excited now. This is gonna be fire. Um, but yeah, I just really like that argument because I've actually had this conversation with my wife sometimes too. Just like, we kind of like to step back into the nostalgic times. Talk about the days of high school or whatever. And I typically talk about sports because that's what I was invested in. And you know, I can say that, maybe I was seen more by the crowd or by the state or by the audience I was watching at the time because I worked so hard and that related to my gameplay. Like I would say I was one of the better athletes on our team, but I wouldn't say that I was like always the number one person to look at. Like it's a team effort. Everybody has their role. Everybody has their spot. But I just like, yeah, as in high school, the way that I saw it was, the 3 years of high school that I played on varsity, like I was the consistent starter every year. So I just feel like that was my mentality. Like, okay, I have to be kind of like the facilitator here. Like I'm the veteran on this team. Like I didn't have any of my classmates that played 3 years of varsity with me. And I'm not like saying like they're worse or whatever for that, but like even though they were my age, I had to be like, okay, we gotta like pick it up. Like this is the things we gotta do. Blah 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 blah. Like that's how it felt, and that's how it did kind of seem like to me. Like during games, like people would be watching me because of that, because they knew I was a consistent starter. So it like felt different that way. Um, but yeah, that's a big point for me. I think like you have to do the work when nobody's watching you because if you're not, like you're not going to progress, you're not going to get better at your sport. So you have to put in hours outside of designated time for that sport. And if you look at all the great athletes, they very well did that too. So you're not special. Nobody really is that special of an athlete. It's just the fact that some people put in more effort to making themselves special by the time they get older, and that's why they get looked at like that. Okay, kind of the last thing that we're going to hit on is, well, I'm going to hit on. I've talked about, how I felt as an athlete with discipline and motivation, kind of regressing a little bit in season, off season kind of things. The thing I'm going to hit on now is those same topics, but now as a coach. Like I said, I've been coaching now for the last 6 years through 3 different sports, and there's a lot of different things in terms of motivation. I feel like is my eye twitching? Can you tell? It might have stopped. No, it's still going. Sorry. I have coached 3 different sports now. The 3 sports that I actually played in high school. I started out coaching basketball. I coached that for 4 seasons. Yeah, 4 seasons. I then went to coaching track. This will actually be my 5th season coaching track. And I have done 2 seasons of coaching football. So I've coached every sport that I played in high school. And I can tell you that some sports require much more effort. No, actually, I'm not going to say that because that's not true. All sports require a significant amount of effort, especially from the head coach compared to the assistant coaches. I mean, but still, even as an assistant coach, there's so much work to be done. There's so much preparation that is needed in order to have a successful season. And I can tell you firsthand that if you don't prepare, it gets very, very, very stressful. I just remember my first year coaching basketball. I coached C team, all through, my coaching career in basketball. I had 4 seasons. And I would not say that I did a ton of preparation. Like, I could have done better. I watched a little bit of film, I listened and I watched what the teams did that we played. I, tried to put my players in the best position to do so. I just felt like as a freshman coach, the best thing you can do is let them learn from the game itself. I mean, we obviously had structured plays and set offenses that we would run, and that was great, and that worked a lot of times because we had very athletic kids on my team. But they're going to learn by playing the game itself. They're going to learn by, okay, their offense is doing this. Can we switch to a different defense to kind of negate what they're doing at this time? Or can we back cut because these guys are playing dead straight? They're not looking for help, blah, 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 stuff like that. So that was my mentality first couple years of coaching. And then later on, I started watching more film, got into getting more set plays dialed in, kind of reading the game a little bit better from a coach's stance. One point that I always struggled with, that I always had a hard time with, was OB plays. I was so bad at making them effective and work when they were supposed to. I struggled very, very hard with OB plays. And as a coach, I felt bad. And now looking back, I feel even worse because those are plays that you have to have because you can get an easy 8 to 10 points a game just off of OB plays if you play your cards correctly. So that was a part that, I didn't prepare enough for, and I didn't have enough discipline in to do well for. And now looking back, I wish I would have done more, and I hope that, someday I get the opportunity again to coach basketball at the high school level because it's very fun, and I want to prove myself that I can do better as a coach than I did when I did coach. It's been 3 years since I've coached basketball. But I would love the opportunity to do it again, just who knows when. And then we'll go to track because I coached that next. So I started coaching basketball in 2020. No. Yes. No. Was it 2019? I think it was 2019. I started coaching in 2019. I coached the 2019 season, the 2020 season, the 2021 season, and the 2022 season. Heck, maybe I did start coaching in 2020. No, 2019. Yeah, so 2019 was my first year coaching. So 2019 coached for 4 seasons, and then in 2022 of the track season was my first year coaching track. And I was just an assistant coach. I started doing jumps and hurdles. Those are the two things that I was designated for. And at my school, like I said, I've said this before, but I went to a small school. I coach at a small school. So we don't have that many athletes in every sport. So we didn't have a boys and a girls coach. So I coached both boys and girls jumps and hurdles. And I think this is where I have found the most success because, as a team, your goal is to send athletes to state. This is my 5th year of coaching. My 4 years prior to this, I have always sent at least one athlete to state. And in my opinion, that's a pretty big deal because, like I said, it's a small school. We don't have, that many kids that do a lot of other sports. We have a lot of one-sport athletes that just do track. And that's great. I think our numbers for state competition have gone up every year, I think, since I started coaching. And I think it's because the coaching staff we have now, I mean, we really promote, having a family mentality at the track. And us as coaches have been very motivated to do well for our athletes, and our athletes have been very motivated to do well for us as coaches. And I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, I have loved track since I graduated high school. I really took for granted the amount of time that I had to do it in high school, and I love it. It's probably my favorite sport right now, to coach, to watch, to even, like, I've raced some of my athletes at practice before. great time. I freaking love doing that. It's so fun. Um, I'm glad that my knees are holding up for that as I'm getting older. But yeah, I just love the I just love track and field so much because everybody can always improve every day and every meet. One thing that my high school coach did was she would always give suckers for every time we would PR throughout the season at meets. And that's an awesome thing because she took the time and effort to look at everybody individually and say, "You grew today. You grew this week. I'm proud of you." And she would reward us for that. And, as the next head coach of our school, I am aiming to do the same. I want to be a coach that, succeeds as a coach, has a great program, and rewards our athletes for doing the things that they are wanting to do. And that's my motivation. I want to be as good of a coach as possible, and I want kids to continue coming to our program. I want to build our program back up to getting like 20%, 25% of our kids doing track. We have a very small school, so if we could get 50 to 75 kids do track at our school, that would be phenomenal. I would love that, and I think that's my goal. Like, I want to build our program up to getting that amount of kids back. Not that I doubt it will happen, but you never know. We could get close. So yeah, the discipline in track is very different because it's not one communal group of people. It is, you have to have a strategy for every individual athlete. It's kind of like school. Like, every kid learns differently. Every kid has their own little goal that they're setting. And as a coach that, has to coach multiple events, it takes a lot of time and effort to do well at coaching those events. Like I said, my first year of coaching, I coached jumps, so triple jump and long jump, and I also coached hurdles. Those were events that I did in high school, and I was very happy to be trusted coaching those things because my high school coach was a phenomenal hurdle coach to me. It took a lot of planning daily for me to, think about the athletes I had, think about the goals I wanted each of them to achieve, and then, be able to answer each of their questions individually because all of them have different approaches. All of them have a different amount of steps into the pit. All of them have different amount of steps that they take in between hurdles. All of them have different form. So you have to take all those things into account. And that's the one thing in track that I feel like I've done well at is I've been very disciplined in my planning for athletes individually and for myself to be able to coach them that way. And I'm kind of back to that point where I'm coaching jumps and hurdles again. And I'm so excited. I cannot wait. Like I said, I'm so motivated and so ready to begin this new chapter as a head coach rather than just an assistant coach. And discipline is something that I'm going to have very much of that this season because being the head coach is a lot more responsibility. But the goal is the same. I want my athletes to do well, and they know that I want them to do well, so they try to do well for me. So there's a lot. I'll talk about football before I get into that point, but there's a lot more. Okay, sorry. I just said I was going to get into football before I said that, but football. With football, there is so much more attention to detail, in my opinion, than any other sport because I can tell you right now, like, watching film is a very time-consuming and detail-oriented thing, and you have to have that kind of mind. I will never accept a head coach job as a football coach because that is terrifying. Football is a very difficult sport to understand, and to coach all different aspects of the game, not for me. I'm in charge of one position on each side of the ball, and as an assistant coach, yes, I have to watch a lot of film to know, the keys for my guys or, the reads that they have to get. But that still takes so much time for me to do. I still have to be so disciplined, so active in the way that I coach. And if I don't, like, I'm in trouble. It's going to be a rough time for the team, for my position that I'm coaching. And in the game, it's not going to look well for me. So the motivation and discipline is very different for each of those three sports, but they all still require a lot. And to be honest, there's much more off-season preparation and off-season discipline than there is when you're an athlete. It may not seem that way, like it obviously doesn't seem that way physically, but mentally, they're on the same scale, brother. Mentally, you have to be locked in to learn from, not just from your mistakes, but learn from the things that you could have done better. You watch film throughout the year, on things that you could have done last season, and you have to be locked into those plays or else you're not going to notice everything that you could. So the motivation and the discipline is so different for coaches and athletes, and every sport is different. Every sport is different physically for the athletes. Every sport is different mentally for the coaches. And same, regression. Regression happens with coaches too. Like I said, if you're not locked in and dialed on the things that you're supposed to be watching as a coach, you're going to regress as a coach. You're not going to do as good the next season. And like I was saying, that is something that I struggled with as a basketball coach. I regressed in my overall coaching, I think, because parts of my coaching repertoire were not as good as others. I feel like I was very good at getting my set plays dialed in and getting those to work throughout the game and getting my offensive sets ready. And our defensive strategy was good. But over the years, the OB plays kind of fall short, and then it makes me frustrated, and then I do poorly, in the parts that I thought I did well. So the point I'm trying to make for both coaches and athletes is if you're not working when nobody's watching, you're not going to do as best as you could be. And that brings me back to, the main point that I brought up at the beginning of that is why the off season is typically harder than the season itself, because in season you're already fixated on that sport. You're fixated on coaching. You're fixated on doing the things that you're supposed to be doing in season to do well and succeed. During the off season, it's easy to forget about those things and easy to, think that you can sit back and relax when you really can't. If you're going to continue being a coach for that sport, you have to lock in. You have to be ready for everything that's going to get thrown at you so you can succeed for your team and for your fellow coaches. And I think that's going to bring us to the end of today's episode. I hope that I didn't ramble on too much. I've said this before. I try to go off the cuff as much as possible. Try to go on a whim, because I think that if you're too structured in what you're saying, it kind of seems robotic. So I might tend to ramble a little bit about things, but I do feel like my points are directly stated, and I think I go off of them pretty well. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. If you please could hit that subscribe button down below, comment down below anything you want to see, any topics you want me to hit on. I appreciate it. Hit that bell so you can get notifications when I post every single Wednesday. So if you're listening to this on a Tuesday, tomorrow I will be releasing another episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. Until next time. Peace.